Hello, everybody, and welcome to another video on Cakey Boy Productions about Cakeverse. And it's taken me less than a year to do this one, so that's good, right? Progress, we're getting there. Also, I'm still doing the thumbs up thing. I think I'm Chuck Norris or something. But anyway, I thought what we do is I've added kind of the level of detail that I'm at the moment expecting I will add to the maps as a kind of starter for 10. And then the rest of the detail will be filled in as time goes by, as stories are told, as things are found out. But I kind of want to have a basis. I kind of want to know where the main cities, settlements, and a few story points that, people can go and explore are on each individual region. We'll do this series by region, I think. So I thought we'd jump into Cake Island. The first one, it's separate, it's on its own, and it's the one that's most fleshed out in my mind right now. And we'll probably move on to, I don't know where we'll move on to next time. We'll either be Circle City or the various tribes, I think. The Paladins one would be easy because it's fairly empty, but I don't know if I could do a whole video about that. But hey, we'll see, right? So same kind of format. This is the map. You see I've added 1, 2, 3, 4 text points of interest. Again, I'm trying to keep it vague. I'm trying to keep the sizes of the symbols are meant to be fairly representative of the size of the town itself. The size of the squares I haven't yet decided on. So kind of the fact that the, Cake Town is roughly 4 squares big, I have no idea what that actually translates to fully at this moment, but Cake Town's meant to be a fairly big place. And I guess seeing as we've started talking about Cake Town, we may as well just crack on. Cake Town is the main city in on Cake Island and indeed in the Cake Empire. God, did I call it an empire? I think I did. But anyway, this is the main city, and it is where, in fact, almost everybody lives. So the majority of the land that I have not covered in a kind of point of interest will be farmland. The main export, the main industry of Cake Island is food. It's food production. They make food for themselves, and they now send food off to the rest of the Cakeverse over on the other landmass, thanks to Launch 1 over here, which we'll get to. As I've alluded to previously, the cakes are very kind of Victorian steampunk with a little bit of cyberpunk mixed in. Cake Town is very clean. A lot of glass. There's a lot of glass in Cake Town. It is sold as a utopia. It is run as if it's this great utopia as well. Also, do I need to get rid of my camera again? And yeah, so it is sold to everybody as this kind of utopia. And honestly, as a cake, you don't really have another choice. You live in Cake Town, unless you become one of the lucky few who becomes a farmer and who is allowed to live on their farm. But more often than not, you're only allowed to live on your farm during the harvest season, and that's purely for work balance. You get more work out because you don't have to travel there every day. More often than not, you are forced to come and live in Cake Town because it keeps the society as a whole. And this kind of controlling aspect of the Cake Empire is very important. And it comes from the people in Cake Town themselves. It is not an edict from the master baker. So let's go up here. I need to kind of work out where I need to put my mouse so it kind of shows you what I'm talking about. So that doesn't get my face in the way. The Master Baker, again, is a very large... The mansion probably wouldn't be that big. At the moment, I've got the mansion kind of coming across as the size of Cake Town, which isn't true. It's an impressive mansion, but it's not city-sized, right? So maybe these symbols aren't to scale. It's a very impressive mansion. It is where all of the cakes come from, and every single cake's first memory will be of learning things in the mansion, and they only ever remember the mansion. Within the mansion, there is nothing that would explain how cakes come to be. That's because underneath the mansion is a huge Resident Evil-esque complex where all of the magic and science and whatever it is that makes cakes able to live comes together. It all happens in this very secret underground complex. Very few cakes, and only the oldest cakes, remember seeing the master baker. They all believe he's still alive, and I'm using the term he very loosely here. We don't actually know anything about the master baker. We don't even know what they are. To know the truth, they are all that is known is that they are the person who, or the entity, or the thing. They are the thing that created the cakes and that keeps on making new ones. Just as kind of side tangent, there is no kind of family structure in cake society. Two cakes do not get together to make a third cake. That's not how it works. All cakes are made by the master baker, and they are not made really to fill a slot, which would make a lot more sense. Basically, what comes out of the master baker is just what he makes, and then when somebody comes out, you find a position for them, either by filling in a slot. Cakes are not immortal. They do live fairly long lives, but they are not immortal. They do die. So there are slots often to fill. With the Cakeverse, Cake Island has actually expanded. So they only ever used to do food. They now do advanced weaponry for the war efforts over in the various places. So they've actually expanded. There's actually more space for cakes to do work. The rulers of Cake Town have asked the master baker to up production via the very stringent communication methods in place, but have received no answer, and the supply of cakes is still very slow and not enough to meet demand right now. But yes, there's a lot of mystery around the master baker, and that's on purpose. Those are story elements. No cake really knows where they come from. No cake really knows what happens to dead cakes. They also go back to the master baker in what one can only assume is probably some kind of mass recycling project, which makes the grave here even more interesting. So in the lifespan of cakes, only one has ever been buried. Again, these symbols are not to scale because that would be a very large grave. It is a very large grave. It's more of a mausoleum than it is just a single tombstone, but it is a single tomb. There's only ever been one cake who has, depending on where you hear the story, has either have the honor or the real disrespect of not going back to the master baker and being buried, left in a box in a very, very large, stupidly large, dungeon large tomb. I'm not going to say who it is, although I think if you followed the channel for a while, you can probably make some references and inferences to who might be buried there. And the fact he's buried there isn't the story. The story is what's going on there afterwards, should anybody decide to take the trek out. It used to be a pilgrimage site ever since the move to Cakeverse. So the tombstone was there before the move to the Cakeverse, before the event happened. Used to be a pilgrimage site, is now very much a taboo location, and you are very much disencouraged to go. Technically, you're still allowed, but most people who go tend to end up in the penal colony for reasons that aren't very well explained. Just next to or down from the tomb, you'll see the forest, the trees. The trees are new. The trees are an invasive species. This forest has grown within a matter of years and continues to expand. There is a war between the Cake Town cakes and the trees. As far as anybody knows, the trees are just normal trees, and they are being cut down. They are being used to help with production, keep the fires going. They are being used in the war effort. But the more you cut down, the more they grow. Nobody knows where they came from. Nobody knows what's going on in this forest, but everybody is worried that eventually all of the farmland, and again, remember, most of what Cake Island does is food. They worry that the farmland is going to be lost, and a lot of farmland has already been lost. And there are So, we say here only one cake's ever been buried and not returned to the master baker. Within the forest, there have been homes, farmsteads lost and bodies not returned or found yet. Endeavours keep on going, but yes, there's something wrong with the forest and they don't know how to defeat it. So then we come down here to Second City. Second City is not really a city. It's just one big workplace. So you live in Cake Town, you work in Second City, and every morning, if you don't work on the farms or in Launch One, so every morning you do the trek down to Second City, you do your job, and then you do the trek back. That's kind of a daily routine for a cake on Cake Island. Second City is very industrial. So whereas Cake Town is very clean, very, very open, very glass, parks, promenades, utopia, Second City is an absolute soot-covered hellhole. All of the work is done there. Well, anything that can be done there, right? So all of the natural food is taken to Second City, all the kind of like your windmills, your grinders, to turn grain into corn, whatever it is, ovens they use to cook, the smaller foods, packaging machines so they can send it on. All of that happens in Second City. It's a horrible place, absolutely horrible place. But it was decided long ago to separate where you live and enjoy your life to where you work. And that's how they did it, by just having these two very distinct, very similar sized towns, because obviously you're housing as many people as you work. Now, working, they can be closer together. They don't really need their own personal space, but there's also very large machines involved at this stage, especially with their continued progress into making arms and weapons for the war effort. Not that there is a war at the moment, but still. Armies are rebuilding and restocking weapons, and Cake Island is doing very nicely out of it. Thank you very much. So that brings us to Launch One. So Launch One, so I kind of went into a kind of brief detail of how Cake Island, how the cakes travel from their island to the landmass through this purple haze, which isn't really there. They're in a void. It's very flat. And if you step off, you will just fall into an endless void of purple goo. They really are. It's a large cannon. Obviously when I come to actually, describe one and use one, the basics of this, it's a large cannon, and there's more than one in Launch One. So Launch One is home to what they would call 4 freight cannon and 2 passenger cannon. Freight cannons are very large. You do not put a live cake, and they do fire balls. These are very, very large balls. Like these are fairly large house-sized balls for the freight ones. And you just load up a freight ball with all of the freight that needs to go, be it food. They will mix food and they will mix weapons. Some of the weapon where they make, they're very big on explosives over on Cake Island. So some of the weapons they make are shipped in passenger balls for reasons that we'll go into should that ever become needed. But yes, so you've got these 4 large freight cannon with the balls, and they get launched over to the various places on the other island. The kind of first big landmass that Cake Island has one return freight and 1 return passenger cannon. The freight cannon is just to return empty balls. They are starting to trade in kind with the various tribes that they trade with. So now there is a little bit of stuff coming back, mainly decorations, knickknacks for people to spend their money on and put in their houses in Cake Town. But not a lot comes back. It's mostly for money, power, and kudos that they do all this trading. Money and how that works in this new world is something we'll go into later on. But it does exist. It is there, and it is very important, as it always is, sadly, in these kind of worlds. The passenger balls are a lot smaller. With cakes being various different shapes and sizes, the seats are very transformable. It's very hard to say how many you can get in. It's more of a weight limit when it comes to this, and of course size plays a factor, because obviously the ball is a finite amount of space. So what you can get in there, what you can't. humans, other humanoid shapes, other life forms have traveled in the balls backwards and forwards. You are not allowed to stay on Cake Island for very long as a guest. More often than not, you will be launched, landed, do your business, and then sent back off. They very rarely allow you to stay overnight. The only exception to that is if you're invited over by the Adventurers Guild. A name I would probably change going forward, but I've given it the name the Adventurers Guild just as I build this up. So yes, that's all really Launch One is. Launch One is just a massive dock. It's a massive dock and freight operation with a little bit of passenger on the side, but not a lot of passenger. There is a Launch 2. Launch 2 is in construction, and Launch 2 is somewhere around here coming off of Second City. Launch 2 is being designed more as a passenger thing. But if they were going to allow passengers and tourists, Cake Island would want to build basically a third city. They're not very imaginative when it comes to naming things. They would want to build a third city which is just for tourists. And that would also be down here by Launch 2 if and when they decide to do it. So that's kind of where we are with Cake Island. And again, this is kind of the level of detail I want to put into the maps. Places of interest, but not fully fleshed out. So, if, even story-wise, when I'm going to start writing stories, I will be using certain game mechanics to try and make them so they all kind of fit nicely together as we kind of go through and explore the Cakeverse ourselves. So, an adventurous Cake decides to, rather than taking the pre-described roads, I know some of them cut off and overshoot. They're not meant to. It's just I will work on these maps as we go. But should an adventurous Cake or somebody from the Adventurers Guild, decide to walk over here, we will discover what is there as we go. There will be rules, it'll have to make narrative sense. Cake Island has always been Cake Island, so it's very unlikely that you're going to find a human settlement on Cake Island because it doesn't make sense. It's always been cakes. We know that it's majority of farmland, so more than likely you're going to find a farm. More than likely you're going to find someone who's happily working for the business that is Cake Town, that is Cake Island. It's very much, can't really say for Queen and Country because I called it an empire, but it's that kind of idea. But you might find an old mine. They are starting to do war effort, so mines are things that may happen. You may find an abandoned farm. There might be a story there. But again, as we explore, it's trying to keep everything kind of logical to the place. When we get over onto the mainland mass, a lot of those rules kind of disappear because all of the different kingdoms, countries, areas that are there are not, they're not necessarily where they landed or kind of where they were warped in on. So the cakes were on Cake Island and the entire island was kind of blipped into the new existence. And it's largely the same as it has been. It is just progressed. Because the other people can't travel to it, and Cake Island has got travel to and from it very under strict control and guard. There has not been a large influence on the landscape itself from these other people who have turned up. Whereas the other land masses, that's not true. People have turned up. There's been a large war. Territory have changed hands. People may have, their city, their town, their settlement, whatever, may have, warped in where the crabs and the lobsters now rule, but due to the way that particular society works, they would have been forced out, and they may now be, either in the Protection Circle City, maybe in the various tribes, or maybe in that other weird landmass that had a Welsh name, and I still can't remember what it was for. But even though, so the point is, even though in the crab area, it's very much run by that society now, and all new things will be built to their They don't actually build, really. They just tend to take over. So, but what it means is if you go exploring in that area, which would be very hard because not even the Adventurers Guild really has ready access there, but for gameplay mechanics, you will be able to use it that way. But if you go exploring there, you could find any number of things from any number of different societies, and possibly societies that do not even exist anymore, that have been wiped out. You know, they were saved as part of the event, but wars happen, small societies, small pockets of certain planets, societies, whatever, may have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time and have now been completely removed from existence. But their structures may still exist. Some of their history may still exist, be it in books or computer disks or inscribed emeralds. However it is, they used to keep their knowledge. Ghosts are a thing. Death is a little bit wonky in the Kekiverse. But that was just a long way of going about, of saying that, you know, as we explore, we will fill in the maps, and we will put in what's there. But we probably won't start the exploration on Cake Island. But if we did, there would be a certain limit to what we would allow to be in Cake Island. It is rolled forward, it is random, but it has to make narrative sense when you roll for it. So if you do roll something that doesn't seem to fit, you either have to go through the narrative loops to kind of make it fit, or you just decide, no, that's not going to work, and we move on to something else. But yeah, anyway, that is a quick, probably not, it's probably like 20 minutes, hopefully a quick video of the map of Cake Island. My intention is to do one of these for every region of the map, and then we will actually get into telling a story in the Kekiverse and adding aspects to the map as we go. See how far those characters get. When they die, and then we go somewhere else and we start to tell a different story. It's basically how it's going to work. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you all when I see you all. Bye for now.